Hey guys, welcome back to the BuzWeaver channel, and we have quite a bit in our top stories today because a lot of this is going to be things that happened over the weekend, and I kind of wanted to bring you guys up to speed and give a little bit of analysis. So from Reuters, Putin says Western sanctions are akin to declaring of war. President Vladimir Putin said on Saturday that Western sanctions on Russia were akin to a declaration of war and warned that any attempt to impose a no-fly zone in Ukraine would lead to catastrophic consequences for the world. So Putin has set his position. He's kind of set his boundaries. He's kind of set his limits. He's not getting a lot of pushback from others, say from NATO, the EU, UK, and US, although, of course, they are trying to give aid to Ukraine as best they can without violating NATO particular policies and so forth. But it is getting interesting to see how things are changing and how the media is making comparisons and contrast. So Putin warns against creating no-fly zone over Ukraine. And I don't anticipate that we'll see NATO or anyone really create a no-fly zone because this would be very much, as he said, akin to a declaration of war. Now, the United States has shut down all Russian flights into the United States and airspace, but not suggesting that there is a no-fly zone because, of course, that is a very declarative statement to say. In other words, it's like a trespassing sign, right? If you, obviously if you trespass, then, there's obviously going to be consequences. So, so Putin's just kind of playing it up. He's just kind of playing up the fact that there isn't anything NATO, EU, and the U.S. can do as far as setting up a no-fly zone, because that's kind of the language that was being thrown around as though it would be some way to get back at Putin, but in reality, it's not. And of course, many of you heard about the Ukraine power plant that was on fire. It's been contained, of course, and thankfully no nuclear radiation leaks or anything like that. So that's very good. But of course, a lot of this is a lot of what we call fourth and fifth generational warfare, a lot of cyber stuff going on. We have, of course, misinformation, psyops, and all these sorts of things that are going on. So fortunately, nothing escalated from this power plant, although it was a very good piece for many of the news outlets that, of course, are experiencing a boon right now. And of course, we saw and we understood from Reclaim the Net, Russia blocks Facebook and Twitter. Naturally, Russia is obviously trying to get ahead of the fourth and fifth generational warfare following its arrest of anti-war demonstrations and crackdowns of independent media outlets. The Kremlin has now blocked access to Facebook and Twitter. So they're just trying to kind of minimize a lot of the talk and chatter that's going on. Of course, we already know that the main social media giants here in the United States are censorious, and they just censor when they feel that someone is making statements or creating some issue for them, as opposed to just allowing people to make distinctions for themselves. But now Russia has decided to go ahead and just get ahead of it and just block these individuals anyway. And then Reddit, of course, the biggest forum of all on the internet. I was going to make a kind of a derogatory statement about Reddit, but I'll let that go. Reddit bans links to Russia state media. So as we can see, Reddit just trying to probably just virtue signal. In a lot of these, we're seeing a lot of virtue signaling. Individuals, of course, as we know, like to change their flags to the Ukrainian flag and so forth. Now, I'm not raising an objection to it. I'm simply trying to give you guys details and contrast here because it's interesting. These very same people that use the Ukrainian flag or become, obviously pro-Ukrainian, again, no objections to that. It's perfectly fine. But these are the same people that never show the American flag, which is quite interesting, is it not? Particularly after the very interesting State of the Union speech where we saw President Biden go into almost a Trump-isms of make America great almost. I mean, it was making America, made in America. We need to make things in America. We need to bring America industry back and this sort of thing. Very, very reminiscent of President Trump. So New York Post, Zelensky pleads for U.S. military aid, says if Biden acted sooner, there would not have been war. I would say that if Biden hadn't been elected, there would not have been war. That might be the simplest way of putting it. But of course, Zelensky has to watch his language. He has to be very careful because the United States is providing him with a lot of aid. Unfortunately, not Javelin rockets, which would probably violate the NATO policy. But the Javelins would definitely take care of anything Russia had to throw at him on the ground. So Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky chided the Biden administration for not slapping sanctions on Russia's Vladimir Putin sooner during an emotional Zoom call with 280 U.S. senators, House members Saturday morning. Of course, they made a big deal about Marco Rubio having shared an image of him. And, of course, here we're seeing the images being used, which is always interesting because as they were complaining about the fact that Marco Rubio shared images, they were sharing the images of the actual Zoom call themselves to make the argument, which is absolutely ridiculous. But nonetheless, despite the fact that a lot of news outlets, particularly here in the West, United States, EU, and Europe, or Europe, EU, and UK, we're seeing a lot of this. The Ukrainians are putting up a great deal of resistance. They're obviously trying to defend their cities and so forth. And I believe that, again, I'm not trying to minimize or diminish any of this. I'm trying to give you guys comparison and contrast between what you're seeing in Western media and what's being projected out of Russia that has been mostly shut down. So Ukraine open to discussing non-NATO models, negotiator tells Fox News. So these are little key signs that, you know, Ukraine is trying to make decisions. They're trying to do things to try to appease the Russians, at least at the minimum, come to a ceasefire, which never ended up happening over the weekend, which was something that was also discussed. But again, we're talking about fourth and fifth generational warfare. We're talking about mainstream media. We're talking about psyops. We're talking about disinformation and misinformation that is freely flowing right now. And of course, the media can just hide behind it as saying, you know, well, this is what we're hearing. This is what was being reported. This is the information that was given to us, and so forth and so on. So they can kind of hide behind it all. Now, one of the main, excuse me, guys, one of the main things here behind it all, of course, is RT, which is Russia Today. And if you watch any of Russia Today, you get a little bit more of that other side contrast, because what you're seeing from what Russia is saying versus what the West, the EU, and UK and US are saying is quite an interesting story, because we can see the levels of desperation from Zelensky. And again, guys, I want to emphasize, I'm making this as detailed in comparison contrast. I'm not picking sides or choosing sides. I think that what Russia is doing is quite disastrous for them and for the Ukrainians. I think there was probably other ways to get this under control or bring more attention to it than having to actually invade. But I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that the West right now is very weak with Joe Biden. He's incredibly weak. And we've talked about this quite often. But if you guys want to see any of the contrasting news, you want to see the other side of the story, you can find RT on Odyssey. And of course, below this video, you can find my various social media links where I post daily. I make comments about what is currently going on. And in particular, I wanted to emphasize here, because I know some people may start to wonder, well, you're sounding a little Russian sympathetic. But again, I'm just trying to say, I'm sorry for using the word again. It's really quite annoying, I know. So I just wanted to point out here that I'm just trying to make comparison and contrast so people understand, because we know the mainstream media here, as well as the tech giants, are very censorious. So when something goes against their narrative, when they don't like what's being said, or they perceive things being said in a particular direction, then they want to censor it, which is interesting because it really comes down to what we've always talked about, how popularity is their highest virtue and influence is their form of currency. And I said here in this tweet, remember, all the leftist progressives, Trump detractors, and Dems who scream to the world that they wanted no part of Trump's America, I see they aren't extending that courtesy to Russians. So Russian vlogger Roman updated his last video outlining what all businesses and companies and industries and corporations and stuff that have all been closed there in Russia. If you guys want to check it out, of course, I can leave that link below this video. But I just wanted to bring you guys up to date on what was going on this weekend and currently going on now. And I think it looks like things might be moving slow for the Russians, but they are making progress because we're seeing kind of a sense of desperation on the part of the Ukrainians. It's very sad to see what is happening there. I, again, do not have any particular sides that I'm choosing outside of the fact that I think that what Russia did was incorrect. They went about it all wrong. And I am in support of the Ukrainians for their sovereignty and for their lives and for the people of Ukraine, absolutely, without a doubt. So this is what I have for you guys today. And of course, below this video, as I mentioned, you can find the various social media links that I belong to where I post daily. So check those out. I want to thank all those on Rumble, Odyssey, and BitChute, on New Tech for all your guys' continued support. And of course, all my YouTube subscribers here. And if you are watching this via YouTube, that would be the channel icon appearing right there on the screen to subscribe. You can click on that to obviously subscribe, as well as notifications. That way you know when there's content here on the channel. And I will see you guys in the next video.